Picture this. It's August 1967. Keith Moon, the drummer of The Who, is celebrating his 21st birthday at the Holiday Inn in Flint, Michigan. The party starts at 10 in the morning, because of course it does. By the time the band plays their show that night, Moon can't even remember being on stage. Back at the hotel, the birthday cake becomes a weapon. 5 tiers of marzipan and fruitcake flying across the room, fire extinguishers going off, the sheriff showing up, and Keith Moon in nothing but his underwear, running for his life across the parking lot and jumping into the first car he can find, a brand new Lincoln Continental that belongs to someone else entirely. He releases the handbrake. The car rolls down the hill, crashes through the pool fence, and sinks to the bottom of the Holiday Inn swimming pool, with Keith Moon still inside. He sits there underwater, in the driver's seat, calmly waiting for the water pressure to equalize so he can open the door. He wasn't panicking. He was planning. That's who Keith Moon was. The most chaotic, most gifted, most self-destructive rock drummer who ever lived. A man who treated reality like something that happened to other people, and somehow kept surviving anyway, until the day he didn't. If this is your kind of story, you're in exactly the right place. Hit that like button and subscribe. We tell these stories every week, and you do not want to miss what's coming next. Keith John Moon was born on August 23, 1946, in Wembley, England. From the moment he sat behind a drum kit, it was obvious he was something that had never existed before. He didn't play like anyone else. He attacked the drums like he was trying to destroy them and rescue them at the same time, crashing across the kit in every direction at once, ignoring the rules of rhythm because he'd already rewritten them. Pete Townshend called him the greatest rock drummer who ever lived. Neil Peart cited him as an influence. And even people who hated everything Keith Moon stood for had to admit, behind that kit, he was an absolute force of nature. He joined The Who in 1964, and within a few years they were one of the biggest bands on the planet. My Generation, Pinball Wizard, Won't Get Fooled Again, Baba O'Reilly. The music was enormous, powerful, almost violent, and Keith Moon was the engine driving all of it. But what made Keith famous wasn't just the drumming, it was everything else. The explosions, the destruction, the hotels. Let's talk about the hotels. Keith Moon had a specific relationship with hotel rooms that was unlike anything the hospitality industry had ever encountered before or since. Cherry bombs in the toilets, television sets thrown out of windows into swimming pools, walls demolished, furniture smashed, fire hoses turned on full blast and aimed at everything in sight. He once rode a motorbike through the hallways of a hotel. He flooded entire floors. The bills were catastrophic. Roger Daltrey once recalled the band receiving a $50,000 damage bill from a single stay. The Holiday Inn chain reportedly banned The Who from all their properties for over 2 decades. And the car, we need to go back to the car, because the Lincoln Continental story, the one the world has remembered as a Rolls Royce, is actually better than the myth. The story grew in the retelling until the Lincoln became a Rolls, and the parking lot became a dramatic stunt. But the truth is more genuinely insane. A drunk, underpants-wearing Keith Moon, running from the sheriff, getting into a stranger's car by accident, and calmly riding it to the bottom of a swimming pool while trying to figure out the physics of underwater car doors. He knocked out a tooth slipping on a piece of his own birthday cake on the way back to the party, then spent the night in police custody at a dentist. That is not a rock myth. That is a Tuesday for Keith Moon. But here's the thing the legend tends to skip over. Behind all of this, behind every explosion and every flooded room, and every sunrise party that turned into a 3-day catastrophe, something much darker was building. And on the night of January 4th, 1970, it arrived. Keith Moon and his wife Kim, along with a group of friends, attended the opening of a pub called the Red Lion in Hatfield, Hertfordshire. The pub was working class, full of skinheads who didn't take kindly to a rock star arriving in a Bentley, ordering expensive brandy, and generally existing the way Keith Moon existed. By closing time, the situation had turned ugly. The skinheads surrounded the car, throwing coins and rocks, rocking the vehicle, trying to tip it over. Moon's driver and bodyguard, a 24-year-old man named Neil Boland, who was also one of Moon's closest friends, got out of the car to confront the attackers. What happened next is disputed in the details, but not in the outcome. Moon, drunk and terrified for his family, got behind the wheel. He drove. And Neil Boland was somehow caught underneath the Bentley as it pulled away, dragged 100 yards down the road. By the time anyone realized what had happened, it was too late. Boland was declared dead on arrival at the hospital. Keith Moon was charged with manslaughter, drunk driving, driving without a license, and driving without insurance. 6 weeks later, the coroner ruled the death an accident, and Moon received an absolute discharge. The judge told him he had no moral culpability. The law said he was free. But Keith Moon was never free of it. Pamela Des Barres, who knew Moon well, would later say that the death of Neil Boland was always in the back of his mind, that it probably drove a lot of his self-destructive behavior in the years that followed. One night, in bed, he broke down completely, calling himself a murderer. He woke up screaming. The man who seemed incapable of taking anything seriously was haunted by the one night he wished he could forget. And so the 1970s happened. The Who became even bigger. Tommy, Quadrophenia, Live at Leeds, some of the greatest rock music ever recorded. But while the band was reaching its peak, Keith Moon was falling apart. The alcohol became constant. The pills became constant. He passed out on stage. He was hospitalized more than once. His wife, Kim, exhausted and heartbroken, left him in 1973 and took their daughter Amanda with her. Moon never truly recovered from losing his family. He moved to Los Angeles, surrounded himself with an increasingly chaotic orbit of parties and excess, and kept drinking. His body, which had somehow survived everything, was starting to show the damage. By the time The Who went back into the studio for the Who Are You album in 1978, Moon could barely play. He sat behind the kit exhausted and confused, disgusted with himself, unable to keep time on parts he would have destroyed 10 years earlier. On one track, the drums were edited out entirely because what he recorded was unusable. Here's the detail that stops you cold. On the cover of Who Are You, the last album Keith Moon would make, he is posed sitting in a chair. The chair has words printed on the back. Those words are, "Not to be taken away." Nobody planned that as a prophecy, but there it is. By the summer of 1978, Moon had moved back to London. He was trying. That's what the people closest to him will tell you. He was genuinely, seriously trying to get sober. He rented a flat in Mayfair from his friend Harry Nilsson, the same flat where Mama Cass of the Mamas and the Papas had died 4 years earlier. Nilsson had hesitated to rent it to Moon for exactly that reason. Pete Townsend told him not to worry. Lightning, he said, wouldn't strike twice. Moon was prescribed a drug called clomethazole, brand name Heminevrin, by a doctor named Jeffrey Diamond who, it later came out, had no real picture of how severe Moon's alcoholism was. The drug was designed to suppress alcohol cravings and prevent withdrawal symptoms, but it was powerful, and it was dangerous when not carefully supervised. The doctor told Moon to take 1 pill when he felt the urge to drink, and no more than 3 per day. On the night of September 6, 1978, Keith Moon went to a preview screening of the Buddy Holly story with Paul and Linda McCartney. He had dinner with them afterward. By all accounts, he seemed okay, tired, a bit of a caricature of himself, but okay. He went home. He watched a film, The Abominable Dr. Phibes, a Vincent Price horror comedy. He asked his girlfriend Annette Walter Lax to cook him lamb cutlets, his favorite meal. She refused. His last words to her were something unprintable about what she could do with her refusal. Then he went to bed and took his pills. Not 1, not 3, 32 clomethazole tablets. When Annette found him the following afternoon, he was gone. Police determined that 32 pills were in his system. 6 had been fully digested, more than enough to cause death. The remaining 26 were still sitting in his stomach, undissolved. The drug he had been given to save his life had paralyzed his esophagus and stopped him from breathing. The man who survived swimming pool cars and explosions and a decade of impossible excess was killed by a prescription medication he took because he was trying to stop drinking. He was 32 years old. At the funeral, Roger Daltrey told mourners he still half expected Keith to leap out of the coffin and announce it was all a joke. That is the most Keith Moon thing anyone has ever said about Keith Moon. The irony of his death is almost impossible to sit with. This was a man who had cheated death so many times, in so many ways, that the idea of him actually dying seemed almost like a violation of the natural order. Hotels survived him. Swimming pools survived him. His own excess survived him. And in the end, what got him wasn't chaos. It was a moment of stillness. A man, alone, trying to get better. Taking too many pills because, as Pete Townsend said afterward, he always took pills in handfuls. It was just a habit. The Who carried on. They always did. But nobody ever replaced Keith Moon. Nobody even came close to replacing Keith Moon. Because what Keith Moon was cannot be replaced. He wasn't just a drummer. He was an argument, loud, relentless, and completely unrepeatable, for what it looks like when a human being lives at full volume and refuses to turn it down. The tragedy isn't that he burned bright and burned fast. The tragedy is that at the end he was trying to burn slower, and nobody helped him figure out how. Keith Moon, August 23, 1946 to September 7, 1978. Moon the Loon, the greatest rock drummer who ever lived, not to be taken away. If this story hit you the way it hit me, leave a comment down below. I'd love to know what you think. Hit the like button, turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one, and go check out the video on Lemmy Kilmister. Because if Keith Moon's story resonated with you, Lemmy's is going to absolutely destroy you in the best possible way. See you in the next one.